there are a lot of lies and misinformation that people tell about PSEF. So let's start with what it is. That when people talk about why has this amount that we thought was going to bring 50 to 100 million, why do we have 1.2 billion? And the answer is the people that we're charging have billions more. Climate change is public safety. What did I just tell you? Heat is killing people at astronomical amounts. We have suffocating air, right? These are all things that are public safety. But when you're the Portland Police Association, public safety equals guns and crime and bad people. It doesn't include the resilience that I believe encompasses what public safety means for my district. This is a contract, right? We can't negotiate everything out in public, but the public does deserve to know what their investment is getting them, right? Let me start by saying that it's really challenging to have discussions and fights amongst Black community in the presence of white people.
Welcome back to the Black Oregon POV podcast. I'm your host, Bruce Poinsett, and this is the show where I ask the big questions and explore the big ideas about Black life in Oregon with a special guest. Today, I'm joined by Portland District 1 City Councilor Candace Avalos, and we're going to be talking about budget battles in city council today. But first off, we're recording this on Friday, August 7th, and the air quality is finally down from the worst major city in the world. So that's a positive. But yeah, Councilor Avalos, how have you been weathering the smoke?
Well, I've got my air purifier on full blast, and it's been going down, but unsurprisingly, guess whose air quality is still not going down as fast as the rest of the city? East Portland. And that is why we have a 10-year life expectancy less than the entire rest of the city. So this is environmental justice in action. It's why I'm very vocal about it, because it is not only something that affects all of us, climate change, but it disproportionately affects the poorest, most vulnerable community like East Portland. So yeah, we're doing our best out here to survive these hostile weather conditions, and I'm fighting to keep bringing resources here to protect us.
Well, we scheduled this a while before. I did not plan for obviously when wildfire season and everything, but I think it's a great segue into the Portland Clean Energy Fund and just the battles over that money. But you know, we recently actually this week there was a ballot initiative that, I guess what do you say, like Portland Police Union was pushing to take money from the Portland Clean Energy Fund to fund more law enforcement that, did not get enough signatures and had a lot of issues. It was reported with just canvassers really like lying to people. But just to bring it back, can you just talk a little bit about one, like what PSEF is and like what it's supposed to fund? Because I couldn't think of a better issue, frankly, to kind of like highlight what this means and kind of give it some more I don't know, make it a little bit more tangible for people, because I feel like when they hear PSEF, it's just kind of, you know, local government jargon.
Absolutely. And that's definitely one of the problems I'm trying to solve is messaging and communication, because there are a lot of lies and misinformation that people tell about PSEF. So let's start with what it is. It was a ballot initiative that passed in 2018, led by Verde, for example, which I used to be the executive director of, but that was before my time officially, and so many other organizations, Coalition of Communities of Color. At the time, Commissioner Joanne Hardesty was really championing it. So it was a wide coalition of folks that said, we should tax, essentially, it's a surcharge tax. We should tax corporations who make 500 million in Portland city limits and a billion or more outside of Portland, 1% of their earnings, and put that towards clean energy projects. Now, clean energy can be defined in lots of ways. And I think that's also one of the conflicts that we're struggling with, is like trying to implement it, and how are we defining clean energy and what should qualify as being eligible for those dollars. But essentially, we're looking at this wildfire smoke, we're looking at these heat waves, we're seeing that the biggest contributors to greenhouse gases are things like buildings and transportation. And so what PSEF is trying to do is solve these problems through investing in solutions like solar panels, like ductless heat pumps that are energy resilient and provide heating and cooling to homes, like making sure that we are planting more trees because tree canopy affects heat, which affects how many people get harmed. And let's not forget that heat kills more people than tornadoes and hurricanes combined across the country. And so heat is the most dangerous threat that I think we're facing as a city. And so having clean energy, having as well as we know that the grid is unstable. We need to put investments into strengthening our grid. We also need to put investments into ensuring people have pathways into a green workforce. So these are all different components of Portland Clean Energy. It's workforce, it's infrastructure, it's resilience, it's emergency response, all of these things that help communities defend against increasingly dangerous weather. So that is what PSEF is. It is and the money that it generates is what causes a lot of discussion. And it's important to remember that when you are charging a corporation that makes billions a percentage, and we enter a global pandemic, and those corporations get away with like bandits with all of our earnings. I mean, Amazon blew up, Walmart, right? People were ordering things from home. The way that we were consuming things changed. We also factor in all these things like tariffs and all these things that are happening under the Trump administration, right? But these corporations are actually getting a lot of money back. The tariffs thing I bring up is because they increased the tariffs and charged it to us, and then they got it on the back end. The corporations got money back on the back end. So it's like that when people talk about why has this amount that we thought was going to bring 50 to 100 million, why do we have 1.2 billion? And the answer is the people that we're charging have billions more than they did in 2018 when we were making projections. And so that's what gets lost. And the final thing I'll say is that what we did a couple years ago, recognizing implementation of millions of dollars is difficult, y'all. We created a climate investment plan, which essentially said, here are the different strategic areas that we need to improve to ensure that Portlanders have climate resilience. Let's make sure that we're putting them into these strategies and putting actual like bureaus behind it, organizations, making a plan that is a long-term plan because we cannot budget a $1.2 billion budget on a yearly basis. You need to make plans. Construction takes time, projects takes time. They need to survive budget cycles. So that's why we always have this constant fight about there's all this money sitting in contingency for PSEF. Yeah, it is planned, right? We, the city of Portland, make our budget every year, and every year it is increasingly getting worse because the days of ARPA money have dried up, and now we're paying the consequences for standing up programs on unsecure one-time dollars that we can't sustain. And so they say PSEF has all this money, but they don't, it's all encumbered. It's all money that's allocated to bureaus. In fact, people are saying, well, why doesn't PSEF help the city more? 740 million of the 1.6 billion goes directly to the city bureaus. So PSEF is already working in your government, it's working in community, and for the Portland Police Association to say that the money's just sitting there, I just told you that's not true. To say that, I mean, their whole argument is not less about climate change, it's more about the money, right? Like they're not trying to make an argument that more policing helps climate change. They're just saying you guys have too much money and our thing is more important. Public safety is more important than climate change, but climate change is public safety. What did I just tell you? Heat is killing people at astronomical amounts. We have suffocating air, right? These are all things that are public safety. But when you're the Portland Police Association, public safety equals guns and crime and bad people. It doesn't include the resilience that I believe encompasses what public safety means for my district. So I know that's a lot of words. It's so hard to explain. I wish I could have made it in an easier way, and I'm trying to make it more simple, but it's not simple. And that's why it's so hard to communicate. and try to get the community on board and be like, no, we have to fight back because they're taking away from your future. And the future is becoming increasingly unstable due to climate change. We have to put these dollars that corporations who benefit from exacerbating climate change, they need to put that money back into us so we can protect ourselves from it.
Well, kind of building off of what you just said, as far as like the money already goes back into the city, I guess the question would be like, is there anything where you feel like as a counselor that you would be comfortable dipping into these PSEF funds to, I guess make that exception?
It's less about am I comfortable dipping into the funds because the council ultimately has the final say on the money, right? No matter
Mm.
what, we have final authority on money, but we have this Portland Clean Energy Fund committee or PSEF committee, and their job, per the way that it's written in charter, per the way that the ballot measure was made, we specifically made sure that there was an independent body of community members so that people in government couldn't just say, look at this windfall. Let's just put it towards other things like we want to do, like the mayor just did in this last budget. Luckily, between an amendment that Councilor Guinea and I put forward, we were able to claw that back. But it's like, why did you think you even had that money to use in the first place? Right. And so, especially because, like I said, it's not like that money is coming from nowhere. He took money from other programs in PBOT, in BES, Bureau of Environmental Services and Portland Bureau of Transportation. He took money from those programs to put into this other thing that did not relate to climate change. But of course, he was like, well, trash on the streets is climate change. If we clean up trash, then that, like, he put it towards sweeps and trash. That's not climate change. That is a basic city service that should be funded with city general dollars. These dollars were for our future, right? And so I think that is the issue that I have about the conversations about, well, can it be used for other things? The Moda Center is the next thing. I know we're going to talk about that, but to preview that, the conversation that I heard and the mayor trying to tell me this, he gave me this document, was like, look, this is green stuff. If we do this for the Moda Center, it's going to fund the green stuff. And I'm like, okay, sure. But what you're telling me, regardless of the fact that there's no actual plan, so you can't even tell me what that is, that's all a farce. But put that aside, you cannot help me, like, you cannot tell me that money that is for environmental justice, it's kind of like saying the rich people in the West Hills should get solar panels with PSEF, but we're all choking on our bad air in East Portland. That's not environmental justice. So again, sure, could it go towards solar panels? And is that good for the environment? But who again are you benefiting? You're benefiting this business class, these people who have plenty of money and they want to be subsidized with more money and take that money from community that desperately needs the basics so that you can have the extras, right? That is my issue with this conversation about can it be allocatable to other things? And in fact, I thought this year, Councilor Novick had tried to, the PSEF committee, they came to us and they were like, we need to make these adjustments because also, like any budget, sometimes you're like, I budgeted $500 for ice cream this month and I only had $250 of ice cream. So what am I going to do with that other 250? That's normal budget stuff, right? So they came to us and said, we put money aside for for electric vehicle charging stuff. And long story short, that infrastructure is not ready for that money yet. But what is ready for the money is housing. And so they took 15 million out of that strategic program and put it into the housing strategic program because there were a lot of projects that are shovel ready that if PSEF can help compete in the capital stack, right, then we can get those in the ground. And we know housing is an issue. And we had this whole fight about it where Councilor Novick was like, well, GHG is just transportation. Well, the number two thing emitter of GHG is buildings, right? And we have to build housing. And if we're talking about PSEF as being for infrastructure, then we should build housing that has the heat pumps in it already, right? I just toured the Garden Estates, a brand new complex that they was old, made new, and PSEF funded a couple million into that project. And now they all have ductless heat pumps. They all have energy efficient water pumps. That is exactly what PSEF is for. So I fought and was successful in getting that 15 million back and put it into housing projects. So those are the kinds of things that we can have a discussion about, but you got to bring community along. You got to prove to me that they are the true recipients, that you're not just giving it to billionaires who already have plenty of money and are not wanting to give us any details. And like, do not make me angry. right? And so I think that is why it's nuanced and why I will continue to fight to protect it for a community that needs it most.
So you mentioned the Moda Center, which you can just go ahead and transition to that because there's, a big vote coming up next week on, I believe, the term sheet from the council, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. So can you just talk a little bit about like, yeah, where negotiations are at with the Blazers, like kind of like what the tenor has been. I think a lot of us we see the headlines, but city council meetings, city council work sessions, these are long things. Most of us are not attending, watching the whole thing. So can you just give us a little inside insight onto what's happening?
How much more time do we have? Because a lot going on. Um, let me give you a brief timeline of what has happened from the beginning. So I found out, and this I'm giving the insider timeline. I found out last fall that there was discussion about the Moda Center needing renovations and the sale of the team, yada yada. Okay. I heard little whispers of it. And I was, it was one of those things where I was like, I don't know if this is a thing yet. I don't understand. We find out later that this was a thing. It's called Project Mount Hood. The mayor and many other stakeholders have been talking about it behind closed doors for many months, but I didn't hear the first inklings of it until last fall. So then, as we're preparing for this short legislative session, I'm being told that we have to find money for the Moda Center. The state legislature is going to take the lead in session to find this bond money, blah, 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 blah. Okay. I was like, well, sure. What does it need? Give me more information. What does the bridge lease say? Right? I'm asking questions that any legislator would ask. And I just kept being told, no, 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 we'll figure that out later. We'll figure that out later. Right? Okay. We're going through legislative session. The mayor is down in Salem beaming, just like, oh, like we're Portland, we're all on the same page. We're going to do this for Portland, blah, blah, blah. But what he didn't tell everybody in Salem, and I know because I'm hearing this from legislators who feel a bit duped, because they were like, well, wait, we were told that the city was all on board, that you had a funding source, that you were ready to go, and that you just needed us to act. Turns out we were kept, the counselors who make the final budget decisions were kept in the dark about what was being negotiated, what was being offered, the handshake agreement that the Blazers keep saying. They're like, well, we thought we had a deal. In March, we're told that we're going to get $120 million. So what's the discussion about? And it's like, you got a handshake deal from a mayor who had no authority and no rights to make that deal on our behalf because he does not decide where money goes. He made it on a promise of using 75 million PSEF dollars. 75 million. Again, everything is encumbered. So you mean you're going to take 75 million out of projects that are currently in motion to put to what? Solar panels on the Moda Center? Seriously? And so we were all kind of like in this weird limbo as counselors. Like I kept asking questions because, during the legislative session, city councilors will meet with the Office of Government Relations. They set up these meetings once a week so that they can tell us what's going on, right? Like, oh, this bill's moving, blah, blah, blah. So in those meetings was where I was saying, I'm hearing the SB 1501 is moving. Like, I don't understand what's going on. What are they voting on? Do they have information that we don't have? Where's the $600 million amount coming from? What does the rent, right? These are the questions I'm asking. And I just kept being told that's a later discussion. That's a later discussion. Right now, we just got to focus on the state giving their 350, whatever, 395, I can't remember, contribution. And then it's written in the state bill that this deal, their money is contingent on the city making a deal, the city and the county, but the city as the owner of the building has the main broker of the deal here, right? And there were other protections in there, supposedly, like you should have an independent cost analysis and you should get this kind of information. So, by the way, we didn't get a lot of that information. And so, there was a letter that was signed by the city councilors where it was like, we all support the Moda Center bill. And we were kind of like, like at least I was, many of us were like, I don't know. I don't have any information. But if this is non-binding, then like it's non-binding. So it's also, I've been jostled of like, what's non-binding, what is binding. And that's the drama we're having about the term sheet. And I'll tell you about that in a moment. So coming back up closer to this time, after the state passed it, there was great fanfare. And then it's in our court, right? no pun intended, for the next step. And then guess what happens next? The Blazers, all the, NBA people that they brought to Salem, all the balloons and the fanfare that they had, yeah, we're going to get this, blah, 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 ghosted us immediately. Immediately after the legislative session, because again, they were like, what do you mean? We already have a deal. What else is there to discuss? The mayor already promised us that we're going to get 75 million of PSAF and the rest of it in, BLT and business license tax and whatever else. But the mayor to this day also has not told us exactly where this money is coming from. And Councilor Green and I had an amendment to try to fix that, but it failed, but another story. And so now it's like they completely ghost us. They don't give us information. The counselors are in the dark. I, of all people, should not be in the dark because all of the discussion then of the Blazers turned to the leadership team of council. So that includes the council president and the vice president and the chairs of all the four committees, right? So that's Dunphy, Clark, Purtle Guinea, Novick, Canal, and me. So we're the leadership team of council, right? And so in those meetings, we're supposedly getting information, but like just long story short, we're not getting information. It's inconsistent. Decisions get made before they're talked about. Council president has a lot. He is responsible for a lot of this confusion, and I'm particularly frustrated about what he did yesterday. And so we're cobbling together to this yesterday, right? Which was the first of two meetings to actually talk about amendments for the term sheet. Mind you, before this, we had a couple of executive sessions because this is a contract, right? We can't negotiate everything out in public, but the public does deserve to know what their investment is getting them, right? And so, in fact, we had another work session that the council president had canceled. And so I was like, great, and yet one more lost opportunity for the public to hear what we think and what we're fighting for. So then again, I was told yesterday was the day, right? Because I came into those exec sessions, I literally brought a stack of paper. I had copies for everybody. I was like, here's my ideas. And they were like, no, 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 not the time. Not the time. That's what we were going to do in public. Okay. And then we were going to have that work session. And then they were like, we have to cancel the work session and turn it into an exec session because blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, why? When are we going to talk in open? Because in exec session, you can't make decisions. You can't make votes and you can't deliberate because that's against the law. So you're literally restraining us in this exec session where all we're doing is getting info thrown at us, but you're not giving me the opportunity to respond and give you legislative direction, which is my job, right? So then we come into this meeting yesterday. I brought 12 amendments and people are like, that's crazy. This is the time. And those 12 amendments were meaty. They had substance, they had meaning, and they were, in my opinion, a reflection of what I've heard from community for the last several months about what they want out of this deal. And then what we are met with, which is wild, is the council president moved the goalposts again. So apparently yesterday was not the time because we didn't send an email the right way. He said you should have sent it to the negotiating team and not to Kristen, even though Kristen's email didn't say that it should go to the negotiating team. There's two kinds of emails. This miscommunication is bureaucratic miscommunication, interpersonal stuff, but the result is that he felt that no amendment should go through yesterday because people didn't follow his process, that this arbitrary process that like I asked him on the dais, I was like, but to be clear, in the email, it says it is a suggestion. It is suggested that you ask the negotiating team what they think about your amendment. And by the way, this negotiating team has not been representing my interests up until this point. And so frankly, I'm not interested in their suggestions. I am interested in what the people deserve out of this contract. And what I asked, the amendments that I put forward were, can we please ask to get rent? Pretty please? Can we ask the billionaire and the multi-million franchise who is using this building that we own, is paying very minimal on it, is getting a lot of the revenue from it? Can we ask them for some rent? And my colleagues said no because they voted no on the amendment. But Dunphy in particular said, I'm voting on no amendments on principle. And so did Councilor Purtle Guinea. And their principles are shaky. I wish I could explain it to you, Bruce, but I don't understand it because it actually doesn't make sense. So yesterday was so frustrating because I said my amendments because what else am I going to do? How am I going to show Portlanders that I actually am trying to get them a return on their investment? So it became a political theater where I had to put my amendments forward knowing that they were going to fail for very weird reasons, like I'm on a principle that I'm not going to approve amendments. And so everything failed. 18 amendments failed. I didn't put all of my amendments up, but essentially they all failed because I only introduced four of them, the most consequential ones, because I was those that were the economic ones. Can we get revenue sharing on the name? Can we get rent? Can we define private contribution so that the Blazers don't come back later and say our private contribution is the user tickets? Because that's exactly what they're saying right now. When we ask them about private contribution, they're like, well, you get some of the percentage of ticket sales and parking revenue, so that's our contribution. No, that is the people that are paying to see your entertainment. That is not private capital from stakeholders and owner groups. And I don't even know what all these people are called, but the rich people. I don't know what they're called. So yesterday ended in us making no changes, in moving forward essentially a term sheet that we're going to vote on next week that has no ask for rent, no ask for private contribution, a measly pilot, which is a property tax offset money. It's like $3 million that we're not even getting the whole of because we're splitting it three ways between Portland Parks. I'm sorry, between Portland Public Schools and Multnomah County, which is fine. I'm not saying they shouldn't get some of that money, but again, that's less of the money that we're getting back for our investment. And lastly, it is not $120 million. It is $400 million that the city is committing because we have to pay 120 up front and then 14 million a year for 20 years. And the amendment that Councilor Green and I put forward was saying, hey, let's strike this area, this part of the term sheet that says that we're committing $275 million before we even know what it's going towards because we don't have any damn specs. And so, and the way that it's written, it could go towards anything, it seems, not just renovation. It's like if we just renovated this building for, because it's going to be more than 400, or I'm sorry, than 600 million, construction costs are going to go up. Let's call it a billion. We just renovated all of this. Why do you need another 14 million a year for maintenance and renovations? You should pay for some of that because we're paying for all the renovations, right? I'm obviously worked up. I'm frustrated, but I hope that this communicates to people that, like, unfortunately, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but this has been happening. The bad faith negotiations are happening on behalf of the Blazers and on behalf of the administration and the city. And your counselors are trying desperately, some of your counselors are trying desperately to earn back some of your money and your trust. And when the goalposts keep getting moved, and when we are told that we can't ask for anything because it's going to scare the billionaire off, I literally do not care what Tom Dundon thinks. I don't work for Tom Dundon. I don't work for the Blazers. I work for East Portlanders. And they stifled that. And now we're moving forward. And also, one last thing I'll say, because it happened during the CBPA thing, which we could talk about. They are now, the six moderate counselors are now using the mayor as their tool. So they're like, they don't, because what I'm hearing behind the scenes is, well, the mayor doesn't need to make a deal with us. He doesn't need to listen to the progressives because he could just get the six of them to vote with him and he could break the tie. And that's their angle. I don't think they actually have six, by the way. I will commend Steve for being very vocal, and he does not want to use any PSEP money. And he voted for my rent amendment. It would have passed if Dunphy would have just not stood on some weird principle. We could have at least had rent in our term sheet, and that didn't pass. So props to Steve Novick. He did try and he did engage with us. The rest of them just completely boxed us out.
To that piece on advocating on behalf of the people, I think a lot of this conversation, the framework has been, you know, what happens, like, I mean, the least generous interpretation I could give is we have to just give in to Tom Dundon because what is life going to be like without the Blazers? And I say this personally is like, Blazers basketball does mean a lot to me. A lot of people, it's just like we have a lot of memories, a lot of connection. But what I feel like gets lost from kind of like the conversation, outside of, city council chambers and kind of like people are more paying attention to this is like, what is at stake for the city to lose, not just in this, again, this upfront payment, but like you said, it's going to be 14 million a year going forward. And that money has to come from somewhere. So what for people who are not like really like locked in like that, what is at stake? What could be lost? What could be the consequences of that?
Well, let me paint this picture for you. The Portland city budget is about 8 billion. Okay. 1 billion of that is the general fund. So everything that's not general fund is things like, your water bill, sewage, right? Other fees and other your property taxes, like all these other fees and things that often you are paying for it directly, right? So like you pay your water bill and that money goes into the water bureau and for water bureau activities. So you can't just pay your water bill and we can just put it towards everything. So those are essentially restricted. The general fund is all these different sources that come into the general fund, okay? Now the general fund, what funds that mostly is police, fire, parks, homeless services. Now, what's important about homeless services is that during 2020 in the pandemic, as we know, the federal government was giving money out to local governments for emergency services. The city decided to invest those dollars into the shelters that they were putting up, the tiny villages, all that stuff. There's all this drama between the city and the county. The city felt like the county wasn't doing enough, and so they decided to do shelters where really that is not the city's business, right? And as housing chair, we can talk more about that. But that is not the city's business, but we have taken it on. And because those dollars that we used to fund it dried up, now that's pressure on the general fund, right? And it's pressure on the general fund for activities that really should be the county's responsibility. So that's one thing. But then again, fire, police, parks, that's the majority of the general fund. Let me also remind you that the police take up a third of the general fund. Out of that billion-ish, they are about 315 million of it. A third. Okay. And mind you, the mayor during this budget, he cut 200 jobs, but the police have 70 unfilled positions in their bureau that got protected. Millions just sitting there. Meanwhile, he cuts 200 jobs, and those jobs were critical community services, right? Because again, it's the general fund pressure, right? And so now you're telling me that we have 120 million for no $400 million that we're going to take essentially from the general fund because a lot of those other monies, like I said, are restricted for certain uses. So the pressure, that's why they look at PSEF because they're like, "Ooh, cash cow," right? And they don't care what the charter says. Why would they care? They care about money, right? So that's why there's that fight. But then also when you have the police who obviously hold a lot of power, they're able to hold on to all these positions. Meanwhile, they put out a staffing report, and in their own report they said staffing does not equal outcomes. So that goes to the ballot measure. It's like 400 more cops is not going to give you the outcomes that you are seeking, right? And they say like they cannot fill the positions. They're on track to get like maybe 30, I think it is. No, don't quote me, but essentially they cannot fill the amount of positions that they have allocated in one budget year. So then my question is, why don't we budget for 30 positions and use the rest of that money for other things that are critical instead of letting you just hold on to money in each budget just sitting in your coffers while people are losing their park services, while seniors are losing their senior pool hours, right? Like that don't make sense to me. But this is politics, right? So this is the conflict of the amount of money and the pressure that it's having on the general fund.
Yeah, with that kind of in mind, I do want to like take it to actually and talk about the more recent viral moment that I know it's been to your chagrin. But yeah, the quote unquote daddy gate controversy. And before we kind of get into, because I just personally I'm kind of a little more interested in kind of like the background as far as like what you all were actually debating over and the policy and the funding. But obviously it's a lot of the discussion's been centered around decorum, even going to like, is this anti-blackness and whatnot? And this had obviously been pretty frustrated by it. But can you just talk about like just from your perspective as far as like what do you feel like has been kind of missing from that conversation?
Oh, yeah, there's so much to unpack here. And let me start by saying that it's really challenging to have discussions and fights amongst Black community in the presence of white people. Okay? Because that stresses me out because I think that our community is often used as a tool to further white supremacy, not just in Portland, everywhere, right? And so I think that that's part of what's at play. That's a big idea. I know that's scary sounding, but like if I'm going to be honest about the dynamics that are underpinning what was going on there, that's kind of where it's brewing from. But what I will say, in that moment, what happened? So we were debating two ordinances to save services after the mayor's budget because we approved the budget because they didn't want to save them during the budget for reasons. And so immediately after the budget season, me with councilors Canal, Murillo, Koyama Lane, and Green submitted a Save Our Services ordinance to try and claw back within, we had like a month essentially before the layoffs happened. And we can always make budget adjustments. There's an annual budget cycle, but we can always use an ordinance to change the budget, right? So that's what we were doing. We put it forward an ordinance to change the incoming budget to save 55 jobs. The other side put together their version, but they also did it during the budget cycle, and their version is simply the Community Board for Police Accountability, CBPA, which was approved by a charter change in 2020, which we've been trying to stand up since then, and we just recently seated what the charter, the way that we wrote the charter, because I was part of that as the former chair of the Police Accountability Board, was that 5% of the police bureau's budget has to go to police accountability. It has to go to them, and they are an independent body, and they get to decide how to spend that money, and they have to be independent, right? That's kind of the whole point, is their independence. And so they literally just got seated. They're in the process of hiring their first director. Once they hire the director, that person's going to hire the investigators and all the staff. They're going to need a building. They're going to need the things that will make them independent, and that costs money. And so what Clark One did, and it was Clark and Pertleguiney, Smith, Ryan, Novick. Zimmerman kept his name off of it, but he supports it. But, he wasn't technically on it, but he's obviously on it, right? And so they said, we're going to take of the $16 million that are projected for the CBPA, because again, it's a percentage of police. So if the police budget goes up, their budget goes up because it's a percentage. They don't need 16 million. Why could they possibly need 60 million? Let's take 10. Let's take 10 and put it towards, you guessed it, more cops and other things. But it's the principle of it. You're going to tell me you're going to take the money that we set aside purposely by charter, by voter approval to make sure that it's not going towards cops, and you're going to put it towards cops, right? And so that is the debate we were having that day, okay? And so we heard our ordinance first. And by the way, Councilor Murillo did an incredible job. She reached across the aisle. She fixed our bill. I was against it. I didn't really want to do this because they were like, the other side was like, we have to have police training. They have enough money, Bruce. They have 70 unfilled positions. You got plenty of money. You've got asset forfeiture money that you're sitting on, which you can use towards training. You have millions of dollars, and yet you still want more. So they were like, we have to get them their $3 million. So Angelita put an amendment forward that passed with most of them. It passed 11-1. I'm sorry, it passed 10-1 because Alana was absent. So with a great big majority to say, okay, we're going to put the police training in there. If that's what you want, fine. If that's what it's going to take to save 55 jobs, fine. We did that, and they still voted no. They still voted no because Councilor Smith, her whole thing, as you have seen over the last over the last year, is she believes that the mayor deserves to break ties, right? The charter says the mayor can break ties, and it does. It's complicated, but it does say that. And so instead of approving ours, even though we gave them literally everything they want, everything that was in their bill was in our bill. It's just that our bill covered more ground. It had accountability. It managed for the fact that the mayor cut all these positions without giving us any analysis of the impact of those positions, right? So that was our concern, and why I didn't want to support theirs, because it didn't have all the jobs I was trying to save. It didn't save all the parks jobs. We just asked voters to approve a parks levy, and then we just slashed their services anyway. We promised voters that money was going to go to protect their parks. They gave us more of their budget, and we slashed it anyway. And when I say we, I say Mayor Wilson, not me. I'm trying to save it. And so they wanted to vote for it and have the mayor break the tie. For other reasons, other people decided to vote for their bill, and it ended up passing 10-2. I voted no. Councilor Koyama Lane voted no. I knew it was going to pass anyway, and I had to stand up for something, right? Because the way that they got to this was ridiculous. It didn't save as many jobs. It didn't have accountability. So in that moment, Councilor Murillo was saying, we don't need like a daddy to save us. I don't remember how she said it, right? But her whole point was like, you guys are depending on having the mayor come in to save you because he's your daddy, right? So that you can get that seventh vote. That's the context. Councilor Smith interrupts Councilor Murillo and says, well, who are you calling daddy? And then Murillo says, well, he's not my daddy, he's your daddy. To which I literally, you can see me on camera and I'm like, oh God, like, like Jesus Christ, why? So like I am not endorsing Councilor Murillo's words. And she has even said, she's like, I messed up. So that is her to own. That's not my problem. But where I come in is that they had that little spat. Council president was like, order, order. He had gotten order, right? And then Councilor and said, Councilor Murillo, you have the floor. You have the continued floor, right? Like what she said was already done, but she still has the floor. And so she continues on. And then Councilor Smith interrupts her again. Just like, well, blah, 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 I don't even know what she said. I sit next to her, or I did, and I also have sat next to her and actually have like she always leaves her mic on. She leaves it on so that she can interrupt people in the middle of when they're talking or when she's muttering little things under her breath, the mic is picking it up. And I've on multiple occasions been like, can you please turn your mic off? Like we can hear you. We can hear you typing. We can hear you opening Facebook. We can hear you talking and muttering under your breath. Turn your mic off. That's disrespectful. That's the decorum I wanted. And so in that moment, she again interrupted and also if you look at the rest of the meeting, and if you look at the last year and a half, this is Councilor Smith's MO. She is constantly interrupting people, making egregious claims. She went on this whole tirade about how I don't represent the Black community. I don't do anything for Black people. So that's what I mean. This is Black people's business out in the open that I don't like, you know? And then I was like, stop. I said, Council President, I used the formality of calling a point of order and saying, point of order, can you please call for order that she keeps interrupting a counselor? I don't care what they're saying. You cannot interrupt other people. And she'd been doing it all day. And so then I said, stop talking when other people are talking. And I turned her mic off. And for context, like I said, I have turned her mic off before where I'm like, Counselor Smith, please. Like, and she's like, okay, like fine, sorry. Like we've had that conversation before. So this is not new. But, of course, Counselor Smith is going to capitalize on this and turn it into decorum so that she doesn't have to face the fact that they passed a bill that I voted no on because I believe it threatens the independence and the financial stability of the police board that I fought hard for, that the Black community in particular needs. Because we were talking about this on the year anniversary of the settlement payment that we paid, right, to Manny Clark. We this is like ongoing. The Portland police continue to kill Black people in Portland. And if you're going to take away money, if you're going to tell me you stand for Black Portlanders and do that by taking away money that protects them, then you don't stand for Black Portlanders. So that's the divide. That's the conflict. And there's lots to unpack in the conflict with Counselor Smith and I and the Black community. She obviously represents different Black people, but she represents Black people too. I'm not saying that she doesn't. I'm not saying that her opinions, she's very pro-police. She does monthly coffee with a cop. She cared, like that's the platform she ran on and that's the platform she won on. But that doesn't mean that all Black people support her in that idea just because she's Black, because as you know, many white people have those values. So just because she got elected doesn't mean Black people put her there, right? Don't get it twisted. And so that's the conflict because I am obviously not on that side of the spectrum. I'm obviously a progressive. I'm a leftist. I'm not a member of DSA. There became this whole discussion, oh, well, DSA versus Black people. Well, then I'm not a member of DSA. You said progressives versus Black people. So which is it? Where do I fall? What happens if I'm both? Do I get a place in the Black community or do I get ostracized to the progressive land and I don't get to be Black just because I don't agree with having more cops? You see how that works? So that's the conflict in a nutshell.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, again, like it feels like a thing that kind of like opened up a lot of, well, I'm not gonna say opened up wounds, but definitely, when you talk about one, just like generational divide, like progressives versus moderates, and again, like a lot of people, because it did go viral and you just have a lot of commentary, especially right now, I'm just thinking about different like Facebook groups and whatnot. And the idea of like you said at the beginning, where having these discussions, especially when it's like a rift between, obviously Councilor Murillo is in there too, but like in this case, focusing on like yourself and Councilor Smith, it's just like two black women who may just like politically, again, both represent the community, but may represent different ideals within the community.
Yeah.
But it gets magnified to everyone. Everyone has a take. Everyone's kind of jumping in, whether they are following or for the most part, not really following, just like see the optics. And I can imagine that's quite frustrating, especially, again, just I'm a I'm not really big on I commend the people who, have the patience to be like in these comment sections and fight it out. It's not really my ministry, but I'd laugh. I said I'm not a lurker. So even like seeing stuff where it's like people are, you point to like Councilor Smith talking about not representing the black community, but like people in some of these sections saying, you know, challenging your very blackness. Like that's again, I have to imagine that is,
Right.
obviously you're going to get pushback, but that is a different level of frustration, especially in the midst of what you're actually arguing about. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the city still in the midst of like it's still in the DOJ lawsuit?
Mhm.
Yeah.
In
Actually,
fact,
just
yep, the federal government just said Portland police is 2 years at minimum, but that is a faint goal because they are nowhere close to being in compliance. And what compliance means is not killing mentally ill people and homeless people, because that's why we're in a lawsuit, because they notoriously disproportionately kill mentally ill people.
because the lawsuit came from the James Chassie killing, I believe. Which so this is my
It's
my
12,
timeline's a little
12 years,
12
12 years
years,
in. Yeah, 12 years
12
in.
years with at least two more to be in compliance. And I mean, we'll get into like a whole other thing that we probably don't have time for, but even like what defines compliance is interesting because from what I've seen, at least observed in like some of those subcommittee meetings, is that compliance is almost determined by the police themselves,
Exactly.
which is
Yeah.
interesting to like not be in compliance even in that. But again, that's a whole
Uh,
other
It's a
piece.
whole thing. The whole thing, but let me give one quick caveat or one quick side trail on this that we talked at length when I was on the Citizen Review Committee, the former Police Accountability Board or the outgoing one, about body worn cameras. Because the police were like, well, we're the only big city that doesn't have body worn cameras. And until we get those, we can't be held accountable because we have no visibility. And then what that article that just came out last week showed is that the police are in the study that they did, it's like 26% of the time they're turning their cameras on, right? Like 18% of the time they're notifying people that the cameras are on. Like these are like basic things about having the cameras, and they can't even meet those standards. They're supposed to not like they're supposed to use the footage to make their report. Like there's just all these things they're still not doing. And so yeah, it's frustrating because this is what I'm fighting up against. And then I'm getting caught in these like weird personality wars. And like, honestly, I do not care. Like I care in the sense that it's very hurtful to have a Black woman who supposedly wants to be my mentor. When I first came in, oh, I want to mentor you, blah, blah, blah. Yet you voted against me for council president twice because this year she had a chance to make me council president and still didn't. And then did some performative thing after, oh, there's no people of color in council leadership. Candace, can you be the vice president? No, I can't because Dunphy's the president. And you can't have two people from the same district. So that is an empty thing. Like you could have made me president. So, and then for her staffer, who was not a staffer, and now she hired this person after he did this to go out on Facebook and say, Loretta Smith is the only Black member of Portland City Council. How do you think that makes me feel? Not just me, but how do you think it makes other biracial people feel? I am 100% Black. I am not half Black and half Guatemalan. I am 100% Black and 100% Guatemalan. You cannot split me into two. And so these are the things, these are the like culture, when we talk about the culture wars, that's the culture war I'm fighting, which is my belief that I deserve to exist in Black community and be part of it, even if I'm not technically 100%. What is this? Are you Voldemort? What, we're not pure blood enough? I don't know if you remember, but per the one drop rule, you got one drop, you're Black. So, you know what I mean? So it's just like when you wrap all that in and it's a way to disguise their underpinning bad policy. that hurts people. And that's what I'm frustrated about because I'm stuck up here debating the daddy comment that, by the way, I didn't even make. Yeah, I muted her mic. I did it. You know what I mean? Like, I know people have feelings about it. I I did what I did, right? I can't take it back. And so I just feel frustrated that we get stuck in these like conversations about decorum and they're just a mask for the real harm that these policies are doing. And this is not the first time we've had this debate about decorum. There are a lot of people on city council who benefit from just being nice. Oh, but they're how could they be so bad? Look at them. They're always smiling. They're always so nice. Yeah, it's easy to smile and be nice when your whole job is just to protect the status quo. I'm not nice because this is not nice. What you're doing to my community is not nice. And I'm not going to pretend to be quiet about it. And that's the friction that I constantly get. And I got to deal with all the people who are like, you need to be nicer to people who are not nice to you. And you know what? To that, I say, you get the version of me you deserve. And if you disrespect me, you don't automatically get it from me. So,
And I guess in a way, is there like a blessing in disguise to this as far as we're talking about budgets and the challenge of communication earlier. And if anything, has there been some level, at least as far as like just some of the way people have been reacting to you or like reaching out to you, or has there been some opportunity at least to be like, so here's what we've been debating about. Here's what's actually like, here's what money's on the table. You know, here's what's been happening with police accountability both now and over the years. Like, I guess is there something to that where it's like, okay, this kind of like this viral spat is like an entryway at least into you know, yeah, again, that communication just generally like we're talking about the generational aspect there where, Counselor Smith has been around obviously and you know, obviously you've been around too, but you're younger. Like it's more of an opportunity, I guess, just to how would I say this? When I've just been perusing like the reactions and seeing like people who might otherwise be in line with the progressive caucus, but I just noticed like just knowing behind the scenes and knowing relationships where it's kind of like rallying behind that decorum thing. So got
yeah.
away from the question, but yeah, has this been an opportunity to at least engage people to some degree?
Well, let me first say, not only is it an opportunity, and not only have I taken it, but that's actually kind of my point is that this is so surface level drama. And when I talk to Portlanders directly, they don't really care about it. Like I'm not going to measure what's happening based on online forums. We all know everybody loves to be a keyboard warrior, right? And when I actually talk to people, uh I spent a night calling prominent Black leaders. I just called them. Just picked up the phone and I called them and I was like, here's what happened. Here's my perspective. Give me your honest feedback. I will hear it and take it. I'll push back on some of it, but I hear you, right? I'm not trying to add to the chaos. I'm trying not to get drug into these wars, right? My view, I'm doing everything I can to fight for Black Portlanders, and that means fixing these systems that are historically always going to keep us down. It doesn't matter. Like, I don't think justice for Black people is just like me giving like I have to build systems, right? Because I won't be here all the time, right? You won't always have these two Black counselors, right? So we have to build something strong that will outlast us sitting in these seats, and that's what I'm trying to do. But that's not easy to sell. It's not sexy. It's hard to communicate. You see, I just spent this last hour telling you all, like, pouring out all of these very complex things. I had this forum the other day, and like it was with a elderly community HOA, and they just come up to me and they're like, "You talk so fast." And I was like, "I know." And they're like, "It's not bad. It just means you're really smart." And I'm like, "Well, thank you." But yeah, I do talk fast because there is just so much, and I do get frustrated that like I don't know how to explain all of these things and tell you because people are reacting to the surface level things. You're reacting to the media clickbait. You're reacting to the thing that is going to get everybody like riled up. And that's what makes people click. That's what makes people engage. But I hate that that's the entry place for civic engagement. The entry place should be the People's Picnic, which I'm having tomorrow, right? 400 people RSVP. That should be an entrance place for you to engage with your government, not to react to a petty viral moment. Right. And so that's what's annoying. And of course, I'm not trying to contribute to Portlanders' real frustration. Let me own that that is a real frustration people have about discord and not seeing us get along and not, therefore, not getting things done. I disagree that we're not getting things done in the sense that the peacock, right? Everyone wants to talk about the peacock and how, we either have all the power or we have no power. It's always confusing. It's always both, and it doesn't make sense. But we've passed the most policies, and we can't pass the policies with just peacock. We have to get 7 people at minimum. So we have reached across the aisle plenty of times to get policies passed. We passed the Keep Portland House ordinance, which was my big thing that I championed, got $9 million in rental assistance, right? Like this is like serious wins for community. But then when you allow people who aren't making these serious big changes to take the narrative and all the air about decorum and not talk about policies, then it's like, how does that make us feel? So it's frustrating. Like I'm not expecting sympathy. I know I'm an elected leader. I have to be held accountable. I have to rise up. I get that. But as a human, as Candace Avalos, the human, who's busting my butt every day trying to fight these systems and feel like anything that I do is criticized based on were you nice enough? That's frustrating because disrupting power is not nice. It's not kind. It creates conflict. It's required to make change. And I'm trying to help build everyone's political muscle so that they can sustain through the hard, uncomfortable conflicts that will always come when you challenge power.
Yeah, Councilor Avalos, thanks again for taking the time this afternoon. You mentioned the People's Picnic. Can people still sign up or RSVP for this?
Absolutely. You can just show up. The RSVP is helpful because you'll get your $10 gift code for food, but you can just do it when you sign up, when you arrive too. It's at Park Lane Park from 12 to 3. We've been keeping track of the air quality. We decided to move forward because it has improved. It's going to be an 84-degree, beautiful sunny day. We've got face painting, bouncy house, balloon animals. We've got a bunch of tabling from city resources and community resources, a photo booth. I think, do we have the free haircuts? I'm waiting to confirm that we got the free haircuts. There's a barber who wants to offer free haircuts. We have school supplies that we're giving away, tons of school supplies. So if you're getting ready, packing your kids' stuff for back to school, come get free supplies. Obviously, free food, music. Yeah, speech or two. We'll keep it short. It's going to be me and the city administrator, Raymond Lee, and Representative Lamar Wise are going to be the speakers. We're also going to give the award out for the Honorable East Portlander. It's something I started last year. So excited to give that award out. And yeah, we're just going to have a blast. We're going to have some fun.
Awesome. Well, yeah. Thank you again for taking the time. And yeah, if you're around tomorrow, People's Picnic, check it
Let's
out.
go.
Enjoy it. Maybe, even I suppose I say this if you want to come and again converse, hopefully not yell, but converse with Councilor Avalos. That is
I
an option too.
I can take it, but if you're gonna dish it, be ready to take it because I'll tell you the truth, how I really feel.
Mm. Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you again, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your Friday.
Thank you, Bruce.
Please like, comment, share, and subscribe so we can help grow this channel. And if you want more content, make sure to follow Black Oregon POV on Instagram.